there's a deep, deep hate for breaking the silence. Do you have issue with them?
I do.
What's your issue with them?
My issue is that so many times they've been proven to try to force people, soldiers, pay them, kind of manipulate them into saying horrible things about the IDF, take things out of context, and they're paid by people from outside sources, and it's like their goal is to be seen as good guys by this world that doesn't like Israel by throwing Israel under the bus and using legitimate suffering that exists that has to be talked about in a way that is not constructive, that is just pouring fuel on the fire. And for me, anyone that does that on either side is wrong. I do think that we should criticize when things are wrong. Let me give you an example. I served in the Tzanchanim unit, paratroopers. A few years ago, I was on reserves, and we were right outside of Shechem of Nablus. And we had, on our first week there, one of our friends got stabbed in the face and in the back a few times. Thank God he survived. And we were looking for this individual who went and stabbed our friend. And we had to go and see, a few houses and things like that. And we were looking for this individual. I wasn't going through the houses, but I was more so securing the fields that existed over there to make sure this person wasn't there. And we had orders to tell everyone in those fields, there were olive tree fields, to leave the area. Just like in any other civilization, if you have a person that murdered someone running out, you would say, hey, go back, we're going to find him, and come back out. And so I was in charge of telling the Palestinians that were taking the olives off of the tree to go back to their homes in the time that we were doing the search for this guy. Eventually we found him, everything went back to normal. And I went to the Palestinians and I told them, listen, unfortunately there was an attack, a person stabbed our friend, he's in critical situation, we're looking for him in this region, so everyone has to go back to their homes, and when we're able to find them, everyone will be going back. Okay, no problem. And I started expressing the situation to them from a human perspective. Right. And an officer comes to me and is like, why are you explaining that to them?
Right.
You don't need to talk to them. Just tell them to leave. And for me, I'm like, what do you mean? If I just tell them to leave, they're going to think that I'm trying to impose on them, oppress them, hurt them. And that's not the case. I want them to stay there. But there's a situation that is dangerous that we need to solve the situation. And that is a criticism that I have of my experiences with the IDF. So you can criticize the IDF. But I think the way Breaking the Silence does it is not to criticize, but to demonize.
So we're actually in agreement here. If someone were to ask me what my issue with Breaking the Silence is, I probably would have given a similar response to that. Abuse of power exists. We both served in the West Bank, and we've seen it with our own two eyes. And it's more rampant than what most people would like to admit and what most pro-Israel supporters acknowledge, I think. It happens a lot.
I think in every civilization and any system.
For sure. There's never been a wartime where, the military whenever you have a military population overseeing a population that's not their own, abuse exists. It's never not existed, but that doesn't mean it's right. And we both acknowledge that. And the approach you took with the Palestinian, if that would be the common approach that soldiers would take, that would actually help in the process that we're trying to achieve, where it's the humanization process. It's showing that we could talk and communicate, and that, imagine if we could bring Palestinians to the point where they don't see soldiers as their enemy, they see them as just guardians of sorts, right? There's a lot of work to be done before that happens, but if every single soldier treated Palestinians with respect the way you did, the way I did when I was serving, well, then the situation would be very, very different. Now, Breaking the Silence, I have the same criticism as you do, but they are filling a void that I'm critical of Israel for not filling. Abuse exists. Israel needs to do more to stop that abuse. We could actually kill Breaking the Silence by doing it ourselves. If we would put Metzach, which is the Israeli police, in the settlements and doing work there rather than trying to catch people smoking weed, which they're doing all the time, then not only do we weaken Breaking the Silence that really is trying to demonize and not even trying to help, but we also create a situation where soldiers aren't contributing to the radicalization of the Palestinians. They could actually aid in their de-radicalization. We could create a situation like that, but it needs to come from us.